Hey everyone, Cory from Aquariumcoop. Today I want to talk about keeping water clear or preventing it from becoming not clear. I feel like a lot of videos of the ones I've done in the past and I see others doing are what to do after your water is already not clear. Maybe it's a product like a clarifier or something like that that we're recommending, or polishing pads, and yes, all of those things will help. But I think because we're not addressing what did we do to get there, we're going to end up using a lot of products. And don't get me wrong, I love it when you guys buy our products, and you should buy everything all the time, always. But I also want to be fair and teach you how to not need as much as well. I feel like that's our duty. So, the first place I'll start is what types of food are you feeding your aquariums? Not all foods are equal. Something like here I've got some freeze dried TubeFX cubes, frozen foods, whole foods, basically. Things that are like, that's just a worm or that is a thing. Those foods will feed out cleaner than flake food and pellets and, big compressed pellets. You compress them, they tend to flake off and get into the water and things like that. So, that will play a big part into how much particulate matter is even in that water column, and are you adding to it every day that you feed, right? We hopefully we're making the aquariums better every day and not necessarily worse every day from us interacting with them. And it'll lead into the next part, but depending on the fish you have also, food sizes can play a big difference. And what I mean by that is when pellets are too big, fish spit them out. They chew them up and spit them, chew them up and spit them. And they're trying to make them small enough to swallow them. Even though we see a big fish, we assume it can eat a big pellet, but people don't realize that, like an Oscar, it actually has kind of like teeth and stuff in its throat, and it basically regurgitates the food a bunch to chew it up. Where if you feed smaller pellets, it will eat those pellets and not have to do that process, which leads to clearer water to begin with. You could also have fish that dig a lot, like loaches, like I've got here. You could have corridoras and things like that, and that's what leads into substrate. Substrate makes a huge impact on how clear your water is going to be. You wouldn't think it. You would just think, I wash my substrate, that's not the problem. Well, think of it like having a gravel driveway or something. When a pine needle or something falls into it, it can go in between the rocks and it stays there and doesn't get fluffed up and everything when you drive by, because it's anchored there. But if you have a very smooth surface, you drive by and the wind's going to carry all that stuff with you, right? Well, that's what's happening in our aquariums. If you run a sands are very fine grain, and it basically creates a layer, and everything will sit on top. A fish swims, it'll waft it back up. The water flow you've got going in there will waft it back up, and that can be a good thing if you're gravel or if you're removing water and siphoning every day. That could be a good thing for you. But if you have a coarse substrate, which I don't have in this tank, but I've got in all my other tanks, like a gravel, it can sit down in between the rocks. And when you do that, it now traps it until you gravel vac or a plant would consume it. And so there are lots of different substrates out there. There's, clay-based ones, there's just rocks, there's crushed coral, there's sand, there's dirt, there's all of that. And in my opinion, the coarser it is, the more stuff's going to get trapped down there. And there's a counterpoint to that. If you trap everything, you never surface it, that's bad too. Well, let's all be on the same page here that we're never going to have an aquarium where we're just never going to service it and let it be bad. Instead, I want to put a total picture together. And if you were worried about crystal clear water or very clear looking water, at least know the type of substrate you choose will have an effect on how clear your water is. And so I'm actually going to be swapping this tank out for a coarser substrate. Even though I like the look of that substrate and everything, I want the water to be clear because I have the clown loaches in there. They're constantly digging. So even though I feed whole foods and things like that, most of the time, there's still enough stuff in there that they're kicking it up. And honestly, it's root tabs and other things in there too doing it because they're digging, trying to find worms and all that stuff down in there. And if I have coarser gravel that's this thick, they'll only get that top layer and everything else will settle down there. I can gravel vac it out at my leisure once a month instead of having to use sand and do it every day. So that's going to be a great improvement as far as visual clarity in there goes. Next up, look at the types of filtration you have. And what I mean by that is how much right? If you have that sand substrate and all the stuff staying in the water column, you're going to need more gallons per hour. You're going to need more coverage throughout the whole tank. You're going to need some of these things because you need to basically not let it sit on the top. It's got to get collected in a filter, and that's how you export it because you don't have the coarse gravel to gravel vac, right? Also look at, do you only have coarse sponge? Do you also only have fine sponge? Do you only have, right? We want to put a plan together, ideally in the perfect system, right? We would have filtration where it starts out very coarse, then it goes to the next fineness, and eventually somewhere it's polishing, right? And what I like to do is I like to have some sponge filters in there, and then maybe if I have a hang-on back, I put a coarse sponge intake on that. Now, little sidebar, ours are actually coarse. They're made not to clog. They will not hurt your filter as long as you service them like once a month, where so many that are out there on the market, they are just a intake sponge. They are too fine. They are not made with open, closed foam to prevent that. But people go, oh, they collect really fine particles. Well, you don't want to choke off your filtration. And so just like a fine sponge filter, you could choke it off. So even though it'll catch fine particles, if it clogs up every 3 days and you only service it every 10 days, well, you spent 7 days where it did nothing, right? So our goal is to get all this filtration working all the time and helping us. So a coarse sponge intake on there. Then on the inside, get a less coarse sponge. Maybe you put in that fine polishing pad in there. Maybe you have a cancer filter doing that. Maybe you have under gravel filter, which tends to be really fine filtration. Maybe you do have a coarse sponge filter and you have a fine sponge filter over here. Maybe you've got coarse gravel and that really is just helping it, plus this and that. But take stock, look at what you got going on and go, hey, I've got all my filtration on this side, or you know what, I need to beef it up over here. Even just an air stone on the other side of the tank gets that flow going so the filter on this side of the tank can catch it, right? Or maybe you've got one filter over here, not a lot going on over here. You need a power head to push it over there so that the gunk just doesn't collect and never make it to the filter if that's the way you're running that tank. So look at the filtration, make sure it's optimized, right? The replaceable cartridges and stuff that you have to buy, not optimized. You can hot rod them. We've got videos on that, articles on that. Use reusable materials and build a plan. Go, hey, I want to solve this problem I'm having. Is the things I'm using, is it actually helping me do that? And realize that real life happens. So even if you're like, oh, I will do this every 3 days, you probably won't during Christmas and when you're sick and you're this. And every time you fall behind in an aquarium, you don't make it up. It just continually builds. So next thing, look into, still filtration, but carbon. If you have brown water, that's tannins from wood. Most times I don't run very much wood in here for that reason. Wood is always rotting. And so not only does it stain your water brown, but because it's always rotting, it's making nitrates. Fish are eating it and pooping it out. And sometimes you'll see like a little sawmill from your pleco where, man, he's really going after that. And those are just sources of poop and matter in the water that I don't want to add. Rocks don't have that problem. Live plants don't have that problem. And so wood, even though I absolutely love it, and I do use it in some scapes, that is true, most times I'm opting out of it so that I can reach a clear water that I enjoy. So carbon will help with that though. It'll take out microparticles, it'll take out staining in the water, and you might use that as part of your filtration system. Purigen will also do that as well. It doesn't filter out microscopic particles, but it does take out the brown water. Next, I would say you also have, there's cloudy water, like cloudy white water and cloudy green water. And both of those are handled in different ways. And sometimes you can't tell the difference by looking. I find the best way to see how clear is my aquarium is to look in it from the end, this way, not the front. If you're only looking through this much water, it's pretty clear looking. You look at it through 4 feet and you go, ooh, it's actually pretty cloudy. And you might get a better look at if that's white or green cloudy. If it's green cloudy, that's an algae bloom. You might use a UV sterilizer. You might turn down the lights. You might have to do a blackout on your aquarium for a week to 10 days to eliminate that. But typically it feeds off light, really hard to get rid of. You can try to water change through. It's really hard. Not impossible, but really hard. Where if it's a white bacterial bloom is what that is, then it's a signal that you need more beneficial bacteria in there, and maybe you kind of did too much with your filters, or maybe you've been too rough in the gravel, or maybe you've been feeding more, added more fish, or overfed one day, or it got extra hot, or there's not enough air in there. but that white looking, you don't want to change water. Maybe you'll use a product like a little bit extra Fritzyme 7, add some beneficial bacteria, help it establish, let that tank calm down. That one will go away over time on its own, assuming that it is from that. If you just dosed a bunch of like crushed coral in the gravel, well, that's just white chalkiness, and that will have to be water changed out. But most times you're going to see it being a bacterial bloom, especially if it's a new tank or a big change has happened, any of those things. And if you can't tell, get yourself a white container, like a butter container or a sour cream container. Get a scoop of water, and then just look at it. And you'll see, is that more, if it's not green, then you know it's white. You saw it from the end, you go, hey, it's real hazy and cloudy in here. But to be sure whether it's green or white, you can put it in the dish and look at it. Green water, got to treat that differently than bacterial bloom, where we don't really touch it, we kind of let it settle out. Next would be, are you water changing correctly? And are you algae scrubbing in the correct order? So what does that mean? That means if we're trying to get clear water, let's put an order of operations that will help you. So first thing, scrub algae on the glass, because that's going to put it into the water, right? So when we take water out from changing water and gravel vacuuming, we want to take that algae out with it. Does us no good to gravel vac, fill the aquarium up, then fill it full of algae. That doesn't make sense. So what we want to do is we want to scrub all the algae, get all that done, all the stuff on the inside. Basically, as bad as the water's going to get, that's what you want. Now, when you're gravel vacuuming, you want to make sure you're actually taking the debris out. Now, it's our most watched video, basically. How to gravel vac properly. There should be no dust and stuff flying in the aquarium. You shouldn't be running out of water. There's very easy ways to start that siphon, pinch the hose, get all the smoke basically leaving through the hose and not into your aquarium. So if you haven't watched that video, check it out up above here. Check it out in the comments, in the description. That one will change your aquariums forever if you're not doing it correctly already, which it seems it is such a simple thing. But until you know how to ride a bike, it's very difficult. Once you know how to ride a bike, you'll never forget it again. And so many people on that video are like, wow, I never knew it could be this easy. I've been doing it wrong for 20 years. And we just developed a good skill. We gravel vac tanks every single day for the last 15 years in the retail store. So we've gotten really good at it and teaching it in person all the time. So make sure you're doing that. So scrub the algae. Then you're going to do any gravel vac or water changing next. So that's step 2. The next thing that I want is don't service your filters in the same day. Now, what does that mean? That means we just gravel vacked, we algae scrubbed, let's say we changed half the water. Well, there's still 50% of the water with algae in it, with poop in it, with other stuff in it. The goal here is to let your filtration do its job, collect all that up for you, and then a day, minimum 24 hours later, but it could be 2 or 3, doesn't matter. As long as you've let it go 24 hours and it's been able to collect most of that for you, then service your filtration, whether it's a canister, a hang-on back, a sponge filter, maybe it's a gravel or an undergravel filter. You got to gravel vac that part again, but let it get the remainder caught into the filters, then service it. If you service those filters right at the same time, you've left 50% of the material in the water, and now that's just going to go into that and start clogging that up sooner. So you're setting yourself up for, it might look good for 4 or 5 days, and then it looks terrible. In a perfect world, we would get our systems to run at least a month without needing water changes, gravel vacuuming, scrubbing, cleaning of filters, all of these things, because we're feeding the right foods, because we're using a substrate that helps us, because we're using filtration optimized to do that, because we are managing what we're doing. If you do all of those things, that will lessen the need for clarifiers, UV sterilizers, extra water changes, extra work, extra carbon, extra purigen, all these things that cost you money. Most of the things that I just said there before, substrates and all that kind of stuff, and types of filtrations and the way you set them up, those are one-time costs. You kind of set it and forget it. You get it in place, you do it, it pays dividends for then on. All the other things that I just listed right before that, the carbon, the clarifiers, UV sterilizer. Those are all band-aid fixes to the original problem. Let's focus on fixing the problems before we get the problems. Better money spent. And by doing all of that and learning from other videos of like how to prevent algae, learning from other videos like, hey, how to actually optimize filtration and properly clean an aquarium and what's the right order and when should you be doing things, all of those will help this thing, even though they don't seem connected. Everything in your aquarium is an ecosystem and they're all interconnected. So if you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't. If you need products, we sell them online all throughout the United States. We're in over 150 retail partner stores. When you buy from us, you help us make more videos like this. You support what we're doing. We make products better. We make more products and all of that. So good luck. I hope you've got crystal clear water here in a couple of months. By the way, it doesn't happen overnight. Give yourself a couple of months to change all these systems and all your aquariums will be doing better. Yes, you could make it look good just by tomorrow, but we want sustainable changes that last, not band-aid fixes that cost you money to get the result. So thank you so much. We'll see you around and good luck.